Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending my presentation. My name is Vanessa Jimenez Sanchez, and I am a PhD student at the School of Sociology and Social Policy at the University of Leeds. For this conference, Together for Our Planet, I would like to share with you some of the findings that I have so far in my research. The title of my presentation is Why Multidimensional Poverty and Economic Growth are relevant for the Mexican case. Trends at the subnational level, 2008 to 2018. Drawing from a socioeconomic and a social policy perspective, my doctoral research examines the relationship between multidimensional poverty and economic growth in Mexico at the national and at the subnational level, with the aim of identifying if economic growth helps the reduction of poverty. This research is also helping me to classify the Mexican states in terms of multidimensional poverty and economic growth levels. In the context of this conference, that is Together for Our Planet, and as well about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I would like to show you that my research topic is linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, no poverty and decent work and economic growth. One of these goals, for example, no poverty, is linked with other goals such as climate action, in the sense that poor people may be more affected by climate change. This link or this relationship is a complex topic, so in this presentation I will not talk about in detail because it's not the aim of my presentation. But I thought that it was important just to show you how these topics could be related. For example, in the literature we find that climate change can affect the flow of people falling into poverty. Many shocks that push people into poverty are directly or indirectly related to the environment and climate. And as I said, this relationship is complex, and the link between poverty and climate change can go in both approaches. For example, poverty is one major driver of people's vulnerability to climate-related shocks and stressors, and this vulnerability is keeping people in poverty. So this there exists some relation between my research topic and climate change, but I will not cover this. And just I wanted to show you the existence of some relationship between these topics. Today, I will show you in this presentation the trends of multidimensional poverty and economic growth in the Mexican states. And I will cover the period 2008 to 2018. And in this presentation, I will show you the trends of multidimensional poverty at the subnational level, that is for the 32 Mexican states. I would like to start this presentation by showing you the location of Mexico. Mexico is an upper middle income country and is located in the Latin America and the Caribbean region. As you can see in this map, Mexico is bordered to the north by the USA, to the south by Belize and Guatemala. Mexico is integrated by 32 states. And as we can see in this map, we can classify Mexico in three parts. We have the south part of the country, the central part, and the north part. An important characteristic about Mexico is the existence of social and economic disparities among the Mexican states. Because Mexico is a large, diverse, and unequal country, it is important to continue analyzing the socioeconomic behavior of this state, and as well of its 32 Mexican states. Mexico as well is member of the OECD and is an emerging country in terms of development. I would like to show you some of the important characteristics about multidimensional poverty and economic growth in Mexico. Poverty in Mexico is a structural problem that has left millions of Mexicans without the benefits of economic development and growth. For example, from 2008 to 2018, on average, 44.6% of the total population was living in multidimensional poverty. This is a significant percentage of the population, so it is important to continue working on analyzing the trends and patterns of multidimensional poverty in this country. In terms of economic growth, the literature has been identified that economic growth in Mexico has been slow since the structural adjustment that took place in the 1980s. From this day to time, Mexico registers low economic growth rates. In the period that covers this research, the Mexican economy grew just by 2.02% on average. So Mexico hasn't registered high levels of well-being and as expected. The rationale for conducting a case study in Mexico, as I said, is the existence of great social and economic heterogeneity between its states. So it's important for this research to identify and to classify the Mexican states in terms of multidimensional poverty and economic growth, because with these findings, it will be possible to propose social policies or the required social policies to help to tackle multidimensional poverty, and as well to find some strategies to promote sustainable growth in the national level and as well at the subnational level. It's important to mention that in this presentation, or for this section of my research, I'm analyzing the trends of multidimensional poverty using the examination of multidimensional poverty rates using the methodology developed by the National Council for the Evaluation of Social Development Policy, Coneval, in Mexico. As well, I'm estimating the changes of multidimensional poverty, the economic growth rates, as well for the 32 Mexican states. And with this information, I'm classifying the Mexican states based on their poverty and growth levels. This is important because the findings that I will have in this section of my research will help me to analyze the relationship of multidimensional poverty and economic growth in Mexico. The data that I'm using for this data analysis to show the trends or some of the trends of multidimensional poverty are data on multidimensional poverty that has been estimated by Coneval, and as well data on real gross domestic product that is published by the National Institute of Statistics and Geography in Mexico. With this data, I'm doing this data analysis. It is important as well to show you the conceptualization of multidimensional poverty and the conceptualization of economic growth that I'm using in this research, because these two concepts are very important in this research. Since at this stage I'm using the data estimated by Coneval on multidimensional poverty, I am using as well its concept of poverty. And this council is responsible for the conceptualization and measurement of multidimensional poverty in Mexico. For Coneval, poverty is a multidimensional phenomenon. A person is in a multidimensional poverty situation when it doesn't guarantee the execution of at least one of their development social rights, and when their income is insufficient to acquire the goods and services this person requires to satisfy its needs. From this concept of poverty, we can identify two important dimensions. The first one is social rights, and the second one is economic well-being. So using this conceptualization, Conoval proposes the measurement of multidimensional poverty using these two dimensions. The first one is economic well-being, and economic well-being has one indicator associated, that is current total income. And this indicator will help the definition of the income poverty line to identify the people who is poor and the people who is non-poor. And as well, the second dimension, the social rights, has 6 indicators associated that are related with different social rights deprivations in education, access to health services, access to social security, quality and spaces of the dwelling, access to basic services in the dwelling, and access to food. So using these 2 dimensions and these indicators of multidimensional poverty, the measurement of multidimensional poverty in Mexico is made using this classification method. In this graph, we can see different quadrants that are related with the economic well-being and with the social rights dimensions. In the economic well-being dimension, we are using income, and income is useful for the definition of the poverty line. And in the social rights dimensions, we use the different indicators on education, access to health services, social security, access to food, quality and spaces of the dwelling. So using this classification method, we can identify the people who is multidimensional poor and who is not, according to these 4 quadrants. In the 4th quadrant, we have the population that is living in multidimensional poverty. Here, the quadrant refers to the people that has an income that is below the poverty line, and the people as well that registers one or more social rights deprivations. So people who is living in multidimensional poverty are those having an income below the poverty line and one or more social rights deprivations. Then we have a quadrant 2 that refers to the vulnerable population due to social rights deprivations. In this quadrant, we have here the population that register one or more social rights deprivations, but has poverty, that has an income below the poverty line. Then we have quadrant 3, that is vulnerable population by income. And in this quadrant, we will find the people who registers an income below the poverty line, but doesn't register any social rights deprivations. So these people, it will be just poor by income. And in quadrant 4, we have non-poor and non-vulnerable people, that is right here. And this quadrant means that the people who is identified in this quadrant registers an income above the poverty line and doesn't register any social rights deprivation. So this is the method in general terms that Coneval uses for the measurement of multidimensional poverty, and this is the data that I'm using for this section of my research. In terms of economic growth, in this research, economic growth can be understood as the sustained increase in an economy, which is usually measured as the increase in the real gross domestic product over a period of several years or decades. In the literature, GDP is a proxy for measuring economic growth. as I said before, in this research, we are calculating the economic growth rates for measuring economic growth in the 32 Mexican states. And an economic growth rate is the percentage change in the value of all goods and services produced in an economy from one year to another. So this is the concept of economic growth that I'm using, and as well the concept of multidimensional poverty. Now I will show you some of the findings. At the moment, this is a work in progress, but I have found some interesting results that are showing me a path to know the classification of the Mexican states. This is a chart about about the trend of multidimensional poverty in Mexico at the national level. As we can see here, we have the percentage of the total population and the years. In 2008, 44.4% of the total population in Mexico was living in multidimensional poverty. For 2018, multidimensional poverty in Mexico decreased by 2.5 percentage points, or by 5.6%. On average, from 2008 to 2018, 44.6% of the total population in the country was living in multidimensional poverty. At the subnational level, we can see in this chart that is clearly observed the existence of high disparities in terms of multidimensional poverty across the 32 Mexican states. We have here a black line that represents the average rate at the national level for the whole period. As we can see here, we have some states that register poverty rates above the national level, and some states that register poverty rates below the national level. So we identified that 16 states register rates above the national level and 16 below. So just to show you the distribution of poverty for 2008 and 2018, I will show you this map. It is clearly observed that multidimensional poverty shows an uneven pattern around the 32 Mexican states. This map shows us the distribution of poverty per state for 2008. We can see here that in 2008, the poverty rate at the national level was 44.4%. And among the poorest states in this year, we found that Chiapas, Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Puebla, these four states, were the ones registering the highest rates of multidimensional poverty. Their rates range between 60 to 80%. On the contrary, the wealthiest states located here in the yellow color, we identified that Nuevo León, Baja California Sur, and Baja California and Sonora were the ones that registered the lowest multidimensional poverty rates. That means these were the states, the wealthiest states in this year. So their poverty rates range between 20 to 30%. For 2018, we can see some changes between these states. At a first glance, we can see that the poverty rate at the national level decreased from 44.4% to 41.9%. However, we can find that the poorest states in 2018 remains being the same. We have here Chiapas, Guerrero, and Oaxaca. These three are, comparing to those 2008, these three remain being the most, the poorest states in Mexico. Conversely, Nuevo León and Baja California Sur reduce as well their multidimensional poverty rates and were located as the states showing the lowest poverty rates. So as we can see here in these two maps, we can see that poverty has been located in the south part, in the south part of the country. The poorest states are located in this part, and some the wealthiest in the north. So this is important in terms of the social policies that needs to be implemented in this country. But what is happening in terms of economic growth? This is a chart about Mexico's economic growth for the period 2008 to 2018. As we can see here, the GDP growth rates show high level of fluctuation in this period. And the Mexican economy grew on average just by 0.2%. We can see here that in 2009, the Mexican economy contracted because of the global financial crisis, and the Mexican economy fell by 5.24%. So there are important differences in terms of economic growth at the national level. At the subnational level, we can see from this chart that show us the trend by Mexican state that heterogeneity is clearly observed in terms of economic growth. This means that the Mexican states register different economic growth rates. Some states are rich and some others are poor. The growth pattern is not the same across the Mexican states, as well as with the multidimensional poverty graph. We can see here a black line that refers to the national level. And as we can see that some states register high rates of economic growth, and we can see as well that there are some states that register levels below the national one. This other chart shows us the average growth rates, and as we can see here, the highest GDP growth rates were located in some states. We have here Baja California Sur with the highest GDP growth rate on average for the whole period. Then we have Aguascalientes, then we have Querétaro and Quintana Roo. These four states registered the highest GDP growth rates. Conversely, the lowest GDP growth rates were located in Campeche, in Tabasco, in Chiapas, and in Tamaulipas. So at a first glance, these findings, these preliminary findings, suggest that the states that show the highest multidimensional, or some of the states that show showing the highest multidimensional poverty rates are those registering the lowest GDP growth rates. In this case, we have Tabasco and Chiapas. On the contrary, those states registering the lowest multidimensional poverty rates, that is the states that are not too much poor, or are the wealthiest, are the ones registering the highest GDP growth rates. In this case, we have Baja California Sur. So this is a work in progress. I need to continue working on estimating the absolute and relative changes, and as well the GDP per capita growth rates to make the classification of the Mexican states in terms of multidimensional poverty and economic growth. So why this is important, why multidimensional poverty and economic growth are important in Mexico? Because poverty exists and because growth is not the same across the 32 Mexican states. So this is a topic that should be investigated more. And this is just part of my research. And I think that these kind of socioeconomic issues are important as well when we analyze the Sustainable Development Goals. And for example, about the link that can exist between poverty and climate change, and all of these important topics that we have to continue investigating to have a better world. So this is everything that I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time. And these are some selected reference. And I would like to close this presentation with a phrase of Brunet, 1920. A study of poverty should mean not simple statistics, but an attempt at precise localization. So it is important to know where poverty is located, where growth is located. If as a researcher, I want to propose social policies to tackle these social issues. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your time. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for the presentation. That was brilliant. And I understand we do have Vanessa on the call as well, so that's brilliant to hopefully respond to any comments and questions. We do have one comment in the chat so far, but everyone please continue to add your comments and thoughts and questions there. But our first question is from Ashley, who says, really interesting and not an area I'm familiar with. I've heard of the GPI, the Genuine Progress Indicator, that is said to be possibly a possible alternative to GDP, as it reflects poverty levels more than GDP. I'd be keen to know what your thoughts are on this metric as compared to GDP. So Vanessa, I don't know if you're able to respond on that, and actually you may not be verbally, but certainly if that's the case, if that doesn't work, please feel free to use the chat.
Yeah, it's working, I think. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vanessa.
It's a very interesting question. You know, in Mexico, we do not have the Genuine Progress Indicator for measuring economic growth. And it's a shame because we only have information available at the subnational level for GDP. So GDP at the moment is the only indicator that I can take into account as a proxy for measuring economic growth. Of course, the results that I will obtain in this research will be different if I use another indicator. And in the literature, GDP is considered as the most important indicator for measuring economic growth. So unfortunately, at the moment I do not have another option or another indicator for using in this research. But hopefully in the future, maybe I can try to collect my my own data to propose another indicator, because of course GDP do not take into account other different indicators or characteristics about the economy of the Mexican states. But at the moment, this is the information that I have available, and as well, you know, the methodology that has been employed for measuring GDP around the years in Mexico is not the same. So it's kind of a messy information. So I'm just taking the information that I have available. But thank you so much for your question. It is relevant. It's relevant and is very important. I will take this into account in my research. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, Vanessa. And I've just got a quick question, and apologies if you did cover it. I wondered what drove the decision to study between 2008 and 2018, that 10-year period. Was that driven by policies happening in Mexico at the time, or by the available data, or something else?
It was about the available data, and as well because the available data on GDP is just available from 2000 to date. disaggregated by Mexican state at the subnational level. But in terms of poverty, the council, CONEVAL, the council that is responsible for measuring multidimensional poverty in Mexico, proposed a new methodology in 2009. So from 2008, from this date to now, we have availability on multidimensional poverty indicators. Before, we do have other different measures that it was just based on a unidimensional approach of poverty that just consider income as an important indicator for identifying people who was poor people and non-poor people. So basically, it was about the availability of data. That's why I'm just studying this period.
Okay, thank you. And do you think if someone, either yourself or the researchers, were keen to then look at patterns since 2018, kind of the next decade onwards, do you think you would either be looking to use or recommend using that same CONEVAL data set, or broadening it, or using any updates if they exist to that?
Well, because for me this topic is new, or that's why I proposed this topic. I use the data already available, because the methodology for calculating the multidimensional poverty rates is high. There exists just one department in the Mexican government, and a lot of people working on that topic. So that's why I use this data. But if someone in the future wants to work on multidimensional poverty as well, I will suggest to use the survey data that is available, and to employ different methodologies that are available in the literature on multidimensional poverty at the moment, because this is as I said, this is like a base for me. I'm using the data that is already calculated, but as well in the future, I'm considering to use the surveys and to propose different methods for measuring multidimensional poverty in this country, because it's important, because there are many poor people in Mexico. So it's important in the sense that the social policies that are needed in each Mexican state are specific, because the context, the conditions, and the economy of each state is different. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. That's brilliant. And thanks again for your presentation.